Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. I've kind of got a lot I want to share with you tonight, both with the seasonal forecast plus the very active pattern that's coming up. So I guess sit back and relax. We're going to cover quite a bit here in this video. First thing that happened today was that the Colorado State Tropical Group released their forecast, their first forecast for the 2022 hurricane season. That's what you've been looking at here. And so a couple of things just to point out with their forecast is they're right now in all categories predicting an above average year. And we're going to talk about why in just a few seconds, but just to give you some ideas here, they're looking at 19 named systems. Normal is around 14 and a half or so. But accumulated cyclone energy well above normal here. So this is one of the most respected groups out there that does this. And another theme of tonight's video is going to be looking a lot at verification. So just to show you how well they did last year, this was the active hurricane season we saw last year, 21 named systems. Now this is one of the great things about CSU. They actually go back through and do a verification. So this is each of their forecasts in April, June, July, and August. And you can see that last year they were predicting anywhere between 17 and 20 named systems. It turned out to be that it was above average at 21. And therefore, we would look at this and I think overall just call this a big success in their forecasting capabilities. Now, what often drives their forecast, let me just say this, one of the main components is they do a very good job at analyzing ocean temperature patterns and the atmospheric response. I love reading their content because of that. And so let's take a look at where we currently stand right now. So as of April 5th, we're looking at sea surface temperatures here. And throughout the month of March, we saw kind of a rebuilding of our La Niña right here in the Central Pacific. We have seen some warmer water that's emerged. We talked about that on Monday. But we still have colder water that's off the Baja and colder water in the Gulf of Alaska, which over the last week or so has trended a little cooler. So a couple things to remember. We call this configuration where there's warm water here and cold water in these two places, that's called the negative phase of the PDO. It increases risk of drought in the midsection of the United States. And La Niña, should it persist during summer, also increases risk of drought in the mid part of the United States. So I want you to keep that in the back of your mind as I'm about to show you the long-range forecast. Well, let's go back and look at a year ago, because ocean temperatures back on April 7th, 2021 look a bit different. So ready? This is this year, and this is last year. The La Niña was fading very quickly, but there was an extensive amount of cold water that was here off of the west coast of North America. What was critical to last year was this. From April to July, this warm water took over, and we lost our signal in the tropics. See that? So there was still quite a bit of cold water here, but the warm water built into the Gulf of Alaska, and that took the drought risk from the midsection of the United States west. And that's what we saw last year. The ridge throughout much of early and midsummer was way over here in the western part of the United States, closer to that warm water. You put big, changes in the temperature patterns in this area, it affects what's going on across the rest of North America. So that gives us some context. Now, this is what I hope you find entertaining but also interesting. I went back and dug out last April's forecast for first May, June, and July from what we consider to be one of the best models in the world, the ECMWF. So you've been looking at two maps. The one on the left shows the April forecast for May, June, and July of 2021. So you can see that we're calling for dry conditions from the southern plains to Montana and throughout the west. Active monsoon, wet in the upper Midwest, and wetter than average in places on the southeast. Warmest conditions compared to average, we're going to go from the southern plains through the Great Basin. So now let's verify how well the models did. So this was their prediction from last April. This is what happened in terms of precip. Missed here, big whiff in this area. That was a region that was forecast to be near normal to wetter than normal. Down south, this was all forecast to be very hot and dry. About the only place they got right was Montana to the Pacific Northwest and California. And that's because last summer, the placement of the ridge was primarily right in this area. But early forecasts had that ridge here. Temperature-wise, all the heat was west as well. So again, this area, compared to normal, was cool. So once again, this was the forecast. This was the precipitation verification for May, June, July. And this was the temperature verification. Now, in April, we also looked out there at the full summer forecast, July, August, and September. And a year ago, they predicted strong southwestern monsoon, active hurricane season, near normal precip in the northwest, but very dry from the central United States through the Canadian prairie. Heat, right here. What ended up happening is the Canadian prairie was extremely dry through summer. They got that right. But what about the other regions? Okay, did well here, missed this in a big way. And remember, in August, we had the late season precipitation that came through and really saved a crop in the Western Corn Belt. So I'm just showing you this so that we can provide some clarity around the what ifs when it comes to long-range weather forecast models. They're primarily focused on a couple of things that go into their initial conditions, ocean temperatures being one of them, which is why I started off showing you what our ocean temperatures have been doing. So as we get into the forecast of this, what I need you to know is these long-range models have been ingesting cold water in the Gulf of Alaska, off the Baja, and also in the Equatorial Pacific. And the CFSV2, that's a model we run here in the United States, continues to keep weak El Nino, in fact, maybe even moderate El Nino conditions. Oh, excuse me, La Nina. I'm sorry about that. Moderate La Nina conditions through spring, into summer, and all the way into fall. It's the most aggressive at keeping the cold water here right in this area. I'll show you the forecast in a second. Europeans, this is their latest forecast. Now take a look. If you took the ensemble average, it's going to stay somewhere here about a half degree below normal with an enormous spread, meaning that there's a lot of uncertainty once we get out there to fall. But through spring and summer, weak La Nina conditions are in the forecast. And each forecast up to this point has changed. So look in March or go back to February. Earlier forecasts were for it to be much warmer. And we showed you that. Thought it was going to break away to an El Nino by the time we got into late summer. Well, since all of these models were just initialized with this resurgence of La Nina, they carry it going forward now. So let me show you what those ocean temperatures are going to do. So this map here shows you, let's go month by month. There we go. This was there it is, April ocean temperature anomalies. So we see the things we've been looking at. The cold water here, the warmer water nosing into it, and the extent of our La Nina. Those are the big features we're going to keep an eye on. All right, as we go from April into May, June, and July, the critical thing for North American weather to watch is going to be the water right in here. Does it stay cold or does it moderate? Does this warm water encroach in on it and warm that area? And there's a variety of ways by which that can happen. But if it does, if that occurs, the risk of having ridging here increases. If it does not, if this stays cold, there's basically a 60% chance, so 6 in 10 years, that the ridge is there instead. La Nina increases the risk of the second scenario. But I would tell you that the more dominant factor will likely be the behavior of the ocean temperatures in this area. Now, from July into August and September and October, why did CSU say chances of being above average? Well, when there is a La Nina still going, which is what the models are forecasting, they see the warmer temperatures already, or the near normal temperatures in the main development region. La Ninas tend to reduce wind shear. If you reduce wind shear over this part of the Atlantic, it allows for any would-be tropical cyclone to intensify, and that's the major concern at this point. Now, let me show you what happens when the models keep a La Nina around and don't make this all go over warm just yet. So let's just come back to the beginning and go down to the US level. And I want to now show you, let's talk precipitation first, and we'll do it on a seasonal basis. So spring. The models continue to keep tight windows east. That's been a problem. And I'll show you in a few minutes, they're also keeping colder air coming through this area, at least through Easter week. They continue to show drier conditions in the west where they've been initialized with dry conditions, and that goes all the way into Montana and then back through the Great Basin in California. So it seems as though the dividing line is about the 95th meridian at this point. Now, just like a year ago, if La Nina is in the forecast, that's May, June, July. The dividing line seems to be the Mississippi. And how about June, July, August? See what the models did? They just put all of the drought back in place because they didn't really moderate the temperatures too much in the Gulf of Alaska or off the west coast of North America, nor did they do that in terms of the La Nina. So they've stayed aggressive on being drier than average here. Now, you've seen that the model accuracy leaves something to be desired. So we have to just take this as information. That's all that it is. And I want to explain to you why the models did that. That's why I talked to you about how they were initialized with drought in place and the cold ocean temperatures. But you can imagine that with drier conditions being forecast for here, that the seasonal temperature forecasts are for it to be hot in that same area. This is the way that the models respond to the current ocean temperature pattern. And that's why they look the way they look. Now, what I gave you a few moments ago was a number. That number was 60%. Historically, based on correlations, the risk of drought development when there is cold water on the west coast of North America, coming off the Baja and in the Gulf of Alaska, the risk here goes up to 60%. So 6 in 10 years would have drought develop. We need to watch it carefully, and I'm going to tell you the most important thing for all of us to watch between now and June 1st is to see how this changes and how the cold water here changes. That's why I put it in every single morning report and all my videos, because that's what we got to keep an eye on. So that's my interpretation of the new long-range data. We've got other fish to fry, though. That's the near-term data. And I have a little bit of a problem here with the near-term forecast, and it mainly comes from the MJO. And let me explain myself. The newest forecast from the European model goes from today all the way through the 21st or 22nd, and it keeps the strong trades back in place. Remember how last time I said, look, they were trying to fade? Well, the model just now brought them back. So I look at this and see the location of mass convergence here, which sits right on top of MJO phase 5 or 4. The models want to say that the MJO is going to pop out all the way over into phase 7, 8, and 1. I don't know how it's going to do that, even though they look like this, like, oh, it's a null space, it's going to come out here. I don't think so. I think it's going to come and stay in here and possibly not really leave this area, which takes the MJO off the table as a dominant driver right now. Despite the La Niña-like behavior of the atmosphere, I don't think that the strongest teleconnection is the MJO. This is what I think it is. So we've been talking a lot about the Pacific jet stream and its momentum. Let me just show it to you in a graphic here. So from the equator to 60 north. So these are the tropics, these are the mid-latitudes. We've seen since March and through the beginning of April, see this area and through here? This is where there's been very weak westerly flow. That shows me the influence in the spring of this La Niña. But north of it, around the subtropical high, the jet stream across the Pacific has at times just really been screaming. And what's interesting is each time we get this pulse, we've been able to correlate that with an active pattern that produces a lot of severe weather, especially across the south. So keep that in mind, because right now, this is what the forecast is of those jet stream level winds here in the mid-latitudes. So as I play this forward, what I want you to notice with me is that the atmosphere is resisting blocking, going all the way through Easter weekend and out there into that week after. Do you see what the models attempt to do? Provide a really long extended jet, which is more of a reaction of when the MJO is somewhere in this vicinity, not way out over the Pacific. But as long as that Pacific jet stays with high momentum, like it's been staying with, I think that this forecast, which is showing you the precipitation patterns from April 20th to May 20th, is not wet enough here. I think we'll see more frequent storm systems coming through this area. I believe that the drought will continue to expand in the high plains, all the way up into parts of Montana. And no, I don't like having to say that, but that's what I think will happen. There's no subtropical component of the jet coming into California. So nothing's there to spin up a system that could come out of Arizona, New Mexico. They're all coming in like this and then ejecting. So I think if I could modify this, I would say that we're going to see tighter windows with our planting, especially through the end of April, but possibly extending into May as well. On the temperature side of this, I'll show you my temperature forecast at the end, but I'm going to tell you that I think through the week after Easter, we're going to be struggling to really bring in really warm conditions across the east. And I think there's actually a late frost worry down south into this area. We'll get more on that in just a few seconds. Okay, what did we just see? Well, this is what's happened over the last week. Big storms. Of course, we talked a lot about these that have come out of the Red River Valley of the south and moved through the southeast, while soaking rains and snow north has really hit due to the stacked up low, which I'll show you in just a few seconds. But some places down here in the southeast have picked up, based on some radar estimates, over 6 inches of rainfall. Why that's important is not only because of the severe weather we just added, which if we look at the unfiltered reports, right now they're saying 115 reports of severe weather, including 13 more tornadoes, which puts us at about 170, a little over 170% of normal on tornadoes so far this year. But it also is important because of the current drought situation. So this is our latest drought monitor. The data goes through Tuesday, but it was released to us today. This is an area that's going to continue to see improvement. Unfortunately, it's going to come via bad storms. We've also seen improvement in here. It has not gotten better in western Texas, this very important part of the Cotton Belt here, and the high plains getting up into Montana. This has been an area that's just been avoided. Same thing for Oregon, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, and California. Driest start to any year since 1893. But just because we did this earlier, this is the latest drought monitor this year, just like to show you last year. So the drought was anchored over the Four Corners. We had a major snow deficit here in the northern plains of the Dakotas. So last year versus this year, we're flooding on the Red River Valley of the North now, whereas a year ago there was no snow on the ground. So it's a different scenario, and the La Niña is much stronger this year at this point. That's what I wanted you to see. That was now, this was a year ago. See the differences there? That's important to see. All right, from here, I'd like to also show you how soil moisture has evolved since February. So this is 16-inch soil moisture on February 7th. Here is March 7th. Look at how much drier it got here throughout the month of February. But then in March and early April, this is what's happened. We've really soaked places here, although it's been drier in parts of Kentucky and Indiana and Ohio. There's places in here that's been drier, but very wet in the south. But the region that's been very dry from parts of, well, really you can start up in Montana, slide through the Dakotas, come into Nebraska, and then right down here through the high plains. This is the area that I'm finding is just absolutely most critical right now with our concern about where this drought's going to continue to go. Today, we have all sorts of wind advisories. So this is this evening. I'm recording about 6 o'clock on Thursday night. So we have all of these wind advisories, red flag warnings. In fact, I was watching some satellite imagery today, and you can see around that big stacked low, which I'll talk about in a second, there was a dust storm on the backside of this, right into this part of the plains. So that's just another indicator on how dry things are in that area. Now, with the storms firing along the coast and the deep upper level low just sitting here and spinning, you heard me call it a stacked low. That's because the surface wind field looks like this. This is all that cold air coming in behind it, and the low took basically 24 hours to go from Minneapolis to almost Green Bay. That's a slow trip. It's because it's stacked. And what I mean by that is the upper level low, which is seen here, is sitting exactly on top of the surface low. Normally, to get the best forward motion and the best development of a low pressure system, you need the upper level low to be behind it. So if you can move it back and have the low out ahead of it, then the whole system progresses east. These are stacked. So the consequence is what I'm about to show you. This starts Thursday evening, and it's just going to play forward, showing you through Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. That low, look, let's go back and forth, just takes forever to move east. We will have enough cold air in here to get some scattered convective bursts, and don't be surprised if you see like sleet, brief but heavy snow showers. This is a kind of a painful system to deal with at this point in the month because it's so slow and it's so cold. But after that, the whole pattern's about to make a big shift. And to show you what's going to happen, I'm going to take you first to the upper levels and show you some of the latest data from the European model. This is the one that I'm going to keep a close eye on. So you're looking at vorticity. I know it's not a term I talk about too much, but it's basically looking at spin in the atmosphere. And coming out of the Gulf of Alaska by Monday is this trough right here. And this trough is forecast to now dig much deeper. Did you see it come all the way through Arizona and New Mexico? Earlier runs, and this is key, brought it through Utah and Colorado and Wyoming. It is now forecast to be much farther to the south. Now, why do you care about these things? Well, let me just show you. If the trough axis is here, and this is kind of the ribbon of high vorticity, what you tend to look for is wherever you're going to move vorticity to a place where it's not. So we expect in this area something called positive differential vorticity advection. In other words, we're putting spin in the atmosphere where it wasn't. That causes a height lowering. That creates rising motion in the atmosphere, which lowers the pressure, and you spin up a big storm system. So just put it all together. Both models, as we normally do, GFS is on the left, European's on the right. First thing we're going to be watching, whoa, we're too far ahead. Sorry, I was jumping ahead. Here's the first thing we're going to watch. There's the big cutoff low. It goes slowly into New England. Now, what you're going to see after this is that the models are attempting to eject a first wave. It's going to come out right here. See it? It's there in the European. It's here in the GFS. And that first wave comes out and goes right to the Red River Valley of the North. The GFS is more aggressive on snow with it. The European is not. It's not the primary wave in which we're going to watch. The primary wave shows up on Monday. It comes into northern California. See it here? And then it digs. Now, could it deliver precip to California? Sure. It's just not the perfect setup. It's too much out of the north and not out of the southwest. But precip will be coming to parts of California. But watch this wave eject. Now, first things first. There is the risk on Sunday night for severe storms in this area. But when the wave ejects right here on Tuesday, getting into Wednesday, and let's just stop it there Wednesday evening, the GFS takes the wave farther to the north and pushes it into Wisconsin. Big dry slot on the backside. The European now digs the wave into Arizona and ejects it into Kansas. Now, I don't get to pick my favorites here, but I could tell you the one that I want to see. It's the European. You say, why? It's delivering more moisture farther to the south, where it is desperately needed in South Dakota, in Nebraska, in Kansas, in Colorado. Is it cold? Yeah, it's probably going to snow there. But then this particular system then ejects much more slowly, whereas the GFS races to Ontario, and the backside hangs on here. Now, nobody wants to see snow here, but it is moisture, and there will be strong winds on the backside of this and a big dry slot right in through here. We're going to watch for a multi-day severe weather threat. I'll show you that in a few seconds. But after that system goes through, just want to make a point here. There's more following it. I mean, just running these operational runs out, you can already see the next system's taking shape. So we're just going to have to keep a close eye on this whole area until the pattern slows down. How about some numbers to look at? I like this one first. This is the 12Z European model looking at precipitation anomalies. Of course, I want more moisture for north of this, but this swath in through here desperately needs to see above average precipitation. We need it farther to the south as well. But this is precipitation compared to normal for the next week. To get the actual differences between the models, look at this. I think this is fascinating. Do you see how the GFS, which took the system farther to the north, puts down all this moisture over the Red River Valley? Remember, these colors are where the GFS is wetter. These are where the European is. European farther to the south and slower is wetter here. The GFS quicker ejecting brings more storms to the Ohio River Valley. The European being slower brings them in later and with less intensity. I think this is just fascinating to look at the differences between these two models. What I have to share with you, though, is that they're going to be producing some heavy rains in places like the lower Mississippi River Valley. And also here, when you look at the total amount of precipitation coming through this, we could be looking at Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, high probability in the next 10 days of grabbing at least an inch of precipitation. There'll be a dry slot in this right in through there that I'm going to have to watch carefully, but I love seeing this on the backside. We could just get these systems to come into California. We could really work hard on our drought scenario. From there, though, I would like to show you the risk of severe weather, and I'm going to stick with the Storm Prediction Center on this, the phenomenal scientist, of course. But this is where the area they're watching is on Monday. This is the area they're watching on Tuesday. And this is the area they're watching on Wednesday. So again, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And so therefore, we're going to have to watch the southern side of this. I will tell you, nothing is set yet. I won't know what's going to happen with the risk of these severe storms, to be honest with you, until Sunday night. That will be when I can finally see the timing of everything, the wind shear profile. I can also see where the instability is. It's not going to be until then. So we'll keep forecasting. Let's now come back to the snow side of it. Now, you remember me a moment ago saying I wanted more of that snow farther to the south. That's because there's a part of South Dakota getting into Nebraska where this part of Nebraska into western Iowa saw about 20% of normal snow this entire winter. That's what you're looking at. This map shows you the percent of normal snowfall for the whole winter so far. So when we look at these forecast maps, and the European model at the 12Z run attempts to do something like this, what I want you to know is the latest run digging farther to the south takes a snow swath south with it. It was much more snowy farther to the north. We need to know if this is actually going to be the case. So I'm going to show you the ensemble forecast of the probability of snow. So here we go. As we just look at the chance of getting at least 3 inches of snow, watch the maps here. You can see that the greatest area that's going to occur kind of encompasses a larger area. And that just shows you where we currently stand with knowing where the wave is going to be. If it ejects any farther to the north rather than digging down here into Arizona and New Mexico, just take the snow swath north with it. That's the big idea. So we need to keep an eye on this as it goes forward. All right, what about week 2? Well, what you're seeing here is the remnants of that storm system plus another one that shows up here and takes off across the south. So the ensembles all the way out there to the 21st are keeping the south and the eastern part of the Corn Belt plus New England to the eastern part of the Cotton Belt and eastern Corn Belt wetter than average. So that's our week 2 forecast at this point. How about a discussion on temperature as we finally near the end of this video? This is where I'm expecting frost over the next 7 days. We do get some pretty cold temperatures that are coming here, but I don't see it being cold enough to cause damage on the wheat. It's just not down to that territory that we have to be concerned about that. But look at how volatile the temperatures are going to be. We've already seen these highs on Thursday, 90s in California, 30s and 40s here in the Midwest. Well, Friday and Saturday, that cold air just slowly moves. while the warmth starts to spread behind it into the plains. But the big show starts to set up on Sunday into Monday. That's the deeper trough coming into the west, knocking the temperatures back, all the warm air opening up here with Gulf moisture. That's setting up this next system that comes out on Tuesday into Wednesday. So we're going to have plenty of cold air on the backside of this to make that snow. So we're going to have to keep an eye on how that's all going to end up taking shape next Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. What about beyond that? And this is some very important information here. The day 5 through 10 temperature anomalies, and I'm showing you the European model here. I usually compare the two, but we're just going to stick only with the European because the GFS has had some trouble running today. You can see here that by day 5 through 10, that cold air moves east, and this is what I'm concerned about. April 17th to the 22nd, we see a risk of that colder air getting stuck in a deeper trough that's anchored right here over like Nashville. So these temperatures could be upwards of 10 to 12 degrees cooler than normal. And if they are, that's a concern about digging that frost pretty deep after Easter. So I'll have to watch it and keep a close eye on it, but I wanted you to know what I'm watching. All right, I like to finish these videos with a bit about South America, so let's do that real quick. Soil moisture values, root zone soil moisture values are now showing you the extent of the drier conditions we've been talking about here in eastern Brazil. I'd say that right now about 25% of the Safrinha corn crop has been affected by this drought. And also, you've probably seen some of the conditions ratings in Argentina go down. That's because it's been very dry in the western side of their main ag belt here in parts of Argentina. Well, the USDA is also keeping an eye on this, and you can see their CHIRPS data set here reflecting the dryness over the last month we've seen in the eastern growing areas, but it's lately encroached in here into Mato Grosso over the last 10 or 12 days. And that's an area that we do expect to stay drier over the next week plus. Now, the models are attempting to bring better precipitation in here getting into that third week of April. Do you see how they're trying to revive this? I'm just going to tell you this is all based upon the changing dynamics of the tropics, which I don't think the models have got right. Because remember, they're all trying to say, I got to hear somewhere, there we go, that the MJO is going to do this, and I don't think it is. If it came out into phase 7 and 8, bring on the rain north. It's got to do that, though, and I don't think it's going to do that at this point. So I think there's greater risk that this area sees less than average precipitation, but not as dry as it's been for the last 10 or 12 days. So there's some issues with this Safrinha crop we need to keep an eye on, all right? Just to give you an idea, it's like early July down there with their Safrinha crop if you want to know what stage the crop is in. So I'll wrap it up here. I appreciate your extra attention today. Hopefully you found this information useful, but I'll talk to you again on Monday morning. Thanks.